Hello everyone and welcome to today's Mediaworks Masterclass, where we're going to focus on the importance of creativity in your marketing strategy. My name is David Norris, I'm the Group Operations Director here at Mediaworks, and I'll be hosting today's session. And I've got my colleagues Paul and Andrew with me. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm Creative Director at Mediaworks, so look after broad creative team of writers, designers, creatives, motion graphic designers. We do a lot in-house, and really focusing on getting the creative strategy together for projects.
Thank you very much. Paul?
Hello, I'm Paul. You might remember me from last month's Masterclass. I'm managing partner and I look after our strategy and insights teams and our creative team. From a creative point of view, I think most of what I do is kind of bridging the gap between working on strategy and then turning that into a creative brief. And I work a lot with the strategy teams, and I work a lot with Andrew and his teams to kind of make sure that we're bringing alive a great product for our clients.
Thank you very much. I think where I'd like to start, really, based on that, Paul, then, is what are the evolving trends that we're seeing in the creative marketing space?
Okay, so I talked to Andrew a lot about this, and I don't think we'll do a masterclass without talking about AI, and AI is clearly kind of revolutionising what the possibilities are for creativity. It's kind of quite interesting that AI itself is kind of built on very large-scale plagiarism of everything that has gone before, and therefore arguable about how unique it can be. But yet we've all seen examples of AI imagery and video and stuff that is truly creative. So AI is there. As the creative teams and the design teams and the videographers within the business, we use Adobe tools for pretty much everything that we do. And Adobe have been putting AI and generative and context-sensitive tools within their products for quite a while. But if anybody hasn't played with Adobe Firefly, go and have a go. It's got things that are quite similar to what OpenAI have been doing with Bing Image Creator, but it takes it to a whole new level. And I think we can only expect AI tools to be proliferating across every aspect of Adobe. But that goes through to video, audio, music, and the whole thing. I think what should be one of the benefits of that is kind of allowing us to do more. So to be more productive, to maybe get a variance of a creative or an ad quicker. But which all sounds great in theory. And in the previous sessions we've been talking about how we in full funnel advertising campaigns you need a lot of ads, and if you're talking about doing a lot of segmentation and personalization, then you need a lot of different formats or clever ways of making them. So yeah, the world of A/B testing, but really A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through to Z and beyond testing is there, and that in itself is kind of quite an interesting challenge. I guess with more stuff, we can do faster production, but you need to manage that better. A lot of the time that, ironically, as a creative team, a lot of it is spent working on process, managing things through properly. How do you cope with all this? And not only kind of the amount of stuff, but can you become blind to what's a good idea or not? And, we always need to kind of keep a handle on the fact that creative has got to stand out and it's got to be exceptional. You can combine all of that AI thinking with some of the more productive tools like Canva, which, has kind of brought a lot of kind of design skills and motion skills and made them available to anybody without having years of experience in Adobe platforms. But you tend to be able to spot a Canva template a mile off. All of this isn't necessarily pushing the boat out. So I think there's a lot of trends within that. And I guess one of the themes that we'll just keep going at all the way through this is about how do you remain distinctive, and how do you keep an eye on the standoutness of what you're doing. And at the end of the day, creativity is all about gaining prominence for your brand. And, you know, we need to remember that. And if everybody's using the same tools, you're more likely than not to be able to come up with an idea that is similar to someone else's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could give do a masterclass without talking about Google or PMax. I'll throw it in there right now, but it's like it's the PMax world when they used to auto-generate assets for you. You know, the reality is all that would happen is it was almost like a throwback to like late 1990s where it was templated, animated slides that they were creating for you as your imagery if you weren't then putting the content in. And it just became much of a muchness.
But surely watch this space for Google, because are they not going to just deploy a load of AI into that?
Massively.
So, I mean, you know, it's fast moving, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, and like you say, how do you be distinctive? How do you use creative to be distinctive in that world? Is to kind of book the trend, isn't it? So the winners at Cannes this year there's been a lot of celebration of craft and a lot of celebration of handmade stuff, and this kind of booking the trend of templates and AI and regimented stuff seems to be a way of getting cut through.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I think, yeah, that is definitely what we're seeing. I think it's becoming really easy to spot. I think, as you said, the templated sort of activity out there, and I get it. Like, I get it why an organisation might make the choice, but actually that creative piece is often the difference between success and failure of campaigns. So if you're just putting out what everybody else is putting out, it actually becomes really hard to stand out by its very definition.
Yeah, and I just guess one other thing about the Cannes winner. So for those of you who don't know about Cannes in France, and they do the world's biggest advertising festival and awards every year. You know, I guess if you win one, you think they're the best awards on the planet, and if you never get anywhere near it, you think it's a bit, you know, elitist. We have had projects nominated. We've been on the shortlist before, never won one. But it's true that more and more they focus on advertising effectiveness. And the example that Andrew was talking about was for luxury fashion brand pronounced Loewe.
Well,
I think. Okay, I had to Google it. And they used a kind of Japanese husband and wife creative team who made handmade models, objects, and kind of everything was absolutely executed beautifully in the campaign. And you know, they won the Grand Prix for luxury and lifestyle advertising. So you know, that's normally a very high bar, but 35% increase in revenue off the back of that advertising campaign. So it really, really works. And you know, it's about making people stop. It's about making people imagine. I think, you know, people really respond to tactility, craft, something that feels authentic. And, you know, all of that feels quite a long way away from the world of AI. You don't normally talk about integrity, craft and authenticity. You know, there's a good quote from Google's VP, General Manager of Advertising, and he said, even when you do have AI in the mix, the heart of the creative process is still people.
Yeah.
And you know, we've got to remember things like that.
Okay, so Andrew, I'm going to come to you next with the question around emerging creative formats. So what are we seeing more engagement with?
I think in a world where the last few years have been so much about video and kind of delivering video that people will watch, I think the formats that are really exciting and that are going to be more and more effective are the ones that people actually engage back with. So a bit of a return to interactivity, getting involved. There's an interesting website called Slavery Footprint, which kind of calculates how many slaves you will, it says, own, but as a result of buying coffee, wearing clothes, living in the Western world, right, just to make people think. And that's all, you know, it's interactive, answering questions. Yeah. And I think there's an appetite for that sort of thing as well. I think the other thing in digital that will start to become more prominent is digital coming off the screens as well. There's a fantastic exhibition, Factory International's exhibition in Manchester at the moment called Sweet Dreams, that's all been designed by, all the illustrations been done by Macbeth, and it's all beautiful animation and kind of delivered on huge screens, telling the story of the food that we eat. And that's like a 30-minute experience that people go, no, no, that's not necessarily anything new, but the technologies to bring that sort of thing to life and to interact with that sort of thing as well is kind of getting more and more interesting.
And do you think it is that interaction piece then, you know, that we are going to see a greater movement towards or trend towards?
Because you talked about kind of experience, and I think, you know, pre-COVID, how much should we talk to clients about, you know, creating real world experiences? That was it, wasn't it? You know, every ad, every piece of content had to be kind of created from this thing. COVID kind of put a stop to all that, because, you know, you had 2 years where, and a lot of the experiential companies went out of business, and you know, when I don't know how it feels in your world, but, you know, it still feels a long way from getting back to that, people wanting to be out all the time and go and experience things. And that might be just because I'm old, but I think that that appetite for real world experiences is probably never been stronger. And, you know, in a world where you're a Gen Alpha, you know, not, you know, forget about words like digital native, you know, then doing something for real in a real space is quite a novel experience. So I think all of that is going to come back with a vengeance. But I think your point about interactivity, you know, we both myself and Andrew have kind of worked through web design cycles because we worked in doing digital for a long, long time. And, you know, where when we first started, websites were very experimental, and because there weren't any rules, you know, and we're talking pre-Google, pre-Amazon. So, you know, but the idea that you could sell something online was like, whoa. And before that, it was just this place that you could be, you were entertaining yourself, you were learning about things, and that was kind of what a lot of those websites were about. I think we've been through a big, long phase over the past 20 years of, you know, certain types of websites emerging, social media emerging, you know, YouTube being, it's like telly, but you choose what you want to watch. And, you know, maybe we're coming back round to, you know, ways that people, I mean, self-discovery has always been an important thing online. So people doing questionnaires, discover what kind of person you are. Like Andrew said about the slavery one, but there's lots of carbon calculators and all these kind of things. So you can discover more about yourself. But, you know, and at the same time, we've had gaming, which is obviously the whole point of it is interactive, that maybe it is a bit of a time to come back to, you know, for the right type of websites to be more interactive.
I mean, if you go to a pub quiz these days, the chances are there'll be at least a round where you do it on your phone, and they'll do it Quiplash style where you kind of log on with a code. Right. So I think even at a really basic level, digital's seeping into the real world, you know. And the ability to interact with things more and more. For brands, like getting people to, at the basic level, engage their brain in the advertising that you're doing, will have a lot more effective than just shouting messages at them. And then the more you build on that sort of engagement, the more and more effective what you're trying to say will be.
So I guess what we're talking about there is in terms of brands and messaging, and it leads us in quite nicely into the idea of storytelling. So I guess how can storytelling enhance sort of creative performance and build better connections with audiences?
I think you hear the word storytelling a lot, and it kind of gets thrown about. I think why it's important and what's important about it is that when you tell a story, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And you kind of set things up, and then there's a payoff, and maybe there's a twist, and the reader has kind of put themselves in the situation and engage with that and imagine things, and that's what makes advertising really effective. I mean, if you ask anybody, do you like adverts, right? Almost universally, everybody will say no. Yeah. I hate adverts. The last thing I want when I'm watching Game of Thrones is it to stop. And I tell you what, I was watching, I've been watching The Boys, and in the middle of The Boys, it stops and you get an advert for, I'm going to say peanut butter. And it takes quite a while to realise that you're not still watching a programme like that and it's a pastiche. And you go, oh no, this is real. They are actually trying to sell me peanut butter. Yeah. It's kind of weird, especially since we've had this period of streaming where you're not getting it. Anyway, so everybody says they hate adverts. But actually, there's loads of adverts that people love. Yeah. And they'll quote, it's playground quotes and people will talk about them. And as soon as it becomes entertainment, then people love adverts and will talk for hours about Aldi gin and the man your man could smell like and all these kind of the things that they love. and that's really powerful. As soon as you elevate an advert by telling stories into something that is art, then people forget that really you're just trying to make them buy peanut butter. Yeah. And kind of go along for the ride. As soon as they do that, you've already won in their brain,
So I think, following on from that then, what are the big challenges, Andrew, that we see out there in terms of, when we're thinking about creative? Like, I always think it's budgets play a big part in this, in terms of what you can and can't do, formats, like capabilities, in-house versus whether you use an external, what are the actual technological capabilities you've got to deliver sort of the creative ideas that people are looking for. So I guess, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that are out there from a creative perspective?
I think everybody in the universe at the moment feels that money is a challenge, right? Yeah. People, businesses, and that kind of, what can I do with the money that I've got? Where do I put the money that I've got? And there's a bit of a tendency to, try and get as much media as possible and spend as little on creative as possible. Yeah. But I think this idea of, is it effective, is a real multiplier on your media budget. So first of all, I think, and maybe I would say, I think you should spend as much money as possible on creative and production as you can, because the more effective that is, the more your hard work in your media spend will be. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you're still not going to end up with limited budgets. Trying to do something great in that, because you're trying to elevate what you're doing. You're trying to make it have higher production values. The good news, I guess, is, and we touched on it a little bit, is that all of that stuff is more cost effective to do, more accessible now. It's really interesting. Tools like AI, just what you can achieve with a smartphone, post-production, the kind of, we'd always done a lot with 3D, hadn't we? We always called it fairy dust, because you put 3D into something and all of a sudden it kind of comes alive. It looks really beautiful. Programs like Blender are free. People can, as long as you have the skills, you can make amazing things with software they literally give away. So I think the opportunity there to create really impressive works of art as advertising is there. You've got to kind of push to use it, and to get the most out of that, you then have to know that you want to focus a chunk of your budget on the creative, on the ideas, right? And when you're coming up with ideas, then it's the mother of invention, right? As soon as you have constraints, you start thinking round things. I remember hearing a a great example about audio versus video and what you can achieve. And if you think about like great films, great storytelling, a lot of it happens off camera. It doesn't just happen off camera, it happens in audio. And so using audio to do those sorts of things. The example was if I want a video of a fleet of Chinook helicopters carrying elephants that they're going to drop in a lake of cream, that is a big budget shoot, right? If I want to do it in audio, it's the elephant to drop, right? And as long as you kind of weaved it into your story, everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's I've just done it for you. You can have that for £2.50.
So I guess one of the things that we've talked about there is sort of producing content, producing assets, whether it's visual assets, audio assets, etc. I guess a question for you, Paul, would be how can marketers effectively create content at scale? I think like while still maintaining relevance and sort of omni-channel experience, making sure that everything joins up.
Yeah. So I think there's this dream of being able to, hyper-personalise, have very, dynamic advertising that recognises the context of what it's being viewed in. Your Game of Thrones example, if it had a dragon sat on the peanut butter jar, I'd have been good, wouldn't it? Yeah. So the dream has been there for a long time. I think there's an interesting thing is probably Byron Sharp would say, don't bother, just make one ad for everybody. But, I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. So there's a bit of a kind of planner's dream of making things really, like I say, context aware. I think, you've got some classic examples in advertising, again, going back in time a little bit here, but the Tipex bear. I reckon it was Tipex.
It was Tipex.
Okay. You ever see the Tipex bear?
I want to shoot this bear.
No. It was the same beginning ad, and then the end changed all the time. Right. What was the name of the chicken?
Subservient chicken burger.
Subservient chicken. Same kind of thing. So the start of all the ads was the same. You got a different ending depending on context. Burger King did a whole suite of ads that were context sensitive for YouTube, depending on what you've been watching. So I think number one, you've got to have a good idea as to why you need to have advertising that is at scale, and back to this kind of it feeling better or it getting more prominence or that kind of thing. So you've got a good reason to do it. Then I think I've used examples there of proper kind of advertising. You might just have a number of different products that you want to get in front of people, and you kind of think that the products might be better for different audiences. So you need to have an idea that can flex, and you can see how it's going to adapt, and a bit of economies of scale as part of your production process. So I think that's really important. I think really understanding your kind of brand codes and what is really important to bake in. So not every ad is the same. There's going to be significant parts of it that are repetition. Coca-Cola do not change their end frame. They've probably had the same end frame on every ad forever. Yeah. So and then I guess if you're talking about video, you're going to be really smart about how you can shoot a lot of stuff in one go. I think the main problems there is you've got to look out for continuity errors. So if you're going to shoot all your digital masterclasses on the same day, you should ideally have the participants wearing different clothing. You can keep that in or not. So things like be smart about your video production, and kind of think about how do you do multiple things at a time. A lot of it comes down to things like photography and setting up a studio where your product shots can all be feel the same, feel like the same part of the family. So there's a lot of it about coming up with ideas that work, coming up with a creative process that works, making sure you understand what has got to be the same and what can be different, and then you've got the process of managing it. And as I said before, a lot of our creative side is about how do you manage production, and then make sure it all gets post-produced in exactly the same way, so you've got a consistent product. Then you've got the whole challenge of how do you get that into your media team to ensure that the right assets are going in front of the right audience, and how do you check on the performance of them? And I think that you know, we're talking a lot about AI-driven, algorithmically driven ad serving. So, you know, should you pick a broad audience but make a load of different creative, fire it all at the audience and see which ones are performing best? And or should you try and orchestrate that to some extent? Either way, someone's got to keep an eye on that. And I think one of the good challenges at the moment is, you know, in the world of more AI-driven, more of the performance marketing side, the role of creative, and if we accept that creative's got a big role to play, how do we ensure that that creative is fresh and that we're focusing on what is really working within that? So I think it's a bit multi-layered, all the different challenges, but that's something that at Mediaworks we're kind of all are really focused on at the moment. So I think it's kind of pretty exciting, really.
Yeah, I think in the performance space, I mean, we've just touched on it there. I think it is really interesting because I do think we're starting to see, I guess, I wouldn't say like them becoming more homogenous, or I probably wouldn't go as far as that, or it's becoming quite difficult to deliver different campaigns. But I think actually one of the definite biggest levers that you can pull in any successful campaign these days is the creative, and it is the content. Because, you know, we see typically, you know, if you can get click-through rate to increase by, say, go from 2% to 4%, which good creative could absolutely deliver for you just as a standalone element, you're driving way more traffic to the website and therefore likely to increase your conversion rate. And I think at a real baseline level, as just one example of many that you could sort of level at creative, it goes back to the point of do you spend more money on that bit, or do you essentially accept that you're going to have a 2% conversion rate and spend your money on hitting more people? You know, and that for me is part of the debate and discussion that we constantly have across clients, is around how do you allocate that budget? Because you could just accept that you're going to put static assets out there that get you a 1% click-through rate, and we're going to hit 10,000 people, or we're going to spend time doing a 3% conversion rate and hitting, for example, 5,000 people. But you sat there going, but the end result in terms of the volume of conversions that you will therefore do, or the click-through rates that you'll do, will pay off in the other end of that. And I think it's that art and science coming together piece that I think is really interesting. So I guess leading on from that though, what are the biggest sort of hurdles when demonstrating return on investment for creative initiatives?
Yeah, so I think you've just kind of talked quite a bit about that, and I think it depends on, you know, you gave a very good example there.
Give the easiest example in performance.
Well, and it's true that if we're trying to extract the impact of creative when you've got variable reach, targeting what platforms you're on, you know, there's a lot of variables there, and therefore it can sometimes be difficult to extract. I'm talking creative generally is having an overall impact versus just spending more. You know, like Andrew said, if you're going to spend more, why wouldn't you make your creative as impactful as possible? So a lot of it really is about ensuring that your creative is having an impact. So, you know, that, as we were just saying before, it could just be having multiple creatives and checking which one performs the best. But I think, you know, the other side of it is, one of the difficulties we have within a lot of the campaigns that we do is, I mean, again, we talked about it in the previous masterclass, looking at attribution modelling, but also kind of more kind of quant studies about the impact of brand. So quant studies of qual things. So yes, you could track sales, which is kind of fine, but you know, if the sale is part of a longer journey and your advertising has been top of funnel, mid funnel, whatever, it might take a while for that to convert. In which case, you're wanting to look at kind of brand attribution. Did people remember the brand that was in the ad? Is it memorable? You know, what do they remember about the ad, and is it kind of forming an emotional connection with them? Because we kind of know that advertising works by doing that. So, but you're not going to get that from GA4, and you're not going to get that from your platform analytics on Meta. if you exceed a certain spend threshold, you do get the brand lift studies from the platforms, which can be really valuable. But I think, wherever possible, to take some time to check the impact of your advertising from some of those qual metrics, because they're the things that will tell you how effective your creative is. And as Andrew said, that creative with a really good media strategy will be your best mix. So there are hurdles because the data points don't necessarily come through. I think the other side of it again is if you look at again, let's go back to Byron Sharp. How do brand effects really work? Well, they work and they're cumulative over quite a long period of time. So you would hopefully see your brand growing over a long period of time, but to get a short-term sales blip might be a whacking great media spend and a money off sale, but that might not be the best path to long-term brand growth. So I think it's having a grown-up conversation about what ROI really tells you and what the payback period is of some of those things. But I think this is all coalescing around to a pretty core point, which is you can spend the money and you can have an ad. If you've got a great ad, it'll make your media spend more effective.
Yeah.
Real world example for you. Imagine you're a crumpet maker, right? And you're trying to sell your crumpets.
Yeah.
You've got a pretty reasonably good media budget to spend. Let's say it's, for the sake of sums, 4 million quid, right? And you've got 4 million quid's worth of media that you can buy. And you're trying to sell these crumpets. They're good crumpets, right? But they're kind of they're just crumpets. How are you going to make people buy crumpets? And then somebody comes along and says, we can get the Muppets for £1 million. Get the Muppets to sell your crumpets. Guaranteed you're selling all those crumpets. Right, so the £3 million that you've spent is going to be twice as effective as the £4 million that you would have spent, right?
And that was one of Warburton's most successful campaigns.
Muppet selling crumpets. Who would have thought we'd be talking about that? Right. Okay. Moving on then. I guess where do we see the next big creative trends, and how do we prepare for them now?
Well, let's start with Muppets selling crumpets, right? We've kind of been through this. I mean, it feels like we've been through a period of there being something wrong with the world for like the best part of a decade, right? And certainly as went through COVID and all of that, there was a kind of seriousness that came into advertising, kind of brands trying to be responsible and all this kind of stuff. And it feels a bit like we're at least from advertising point of view, we're coming out of the other side of that. That humour's back again, going back to the can line stuff. There's a lot more humour coming through in the winners. Brands kind of being a lot more playful again. And I think humour is one of those things that really gets cut through when you do it right, and brands having a personality, and it's one of those things that makes audiences enjoy advertising, right? Yeah. So I've got some stats. Studies show that if a brand uses humour, 80% of people are more likely to buy from the brand again, 72% of people are more likely to choose the brand over the competition, and 63% of people will spend more with the brand. Yet 95% of business leaders fear using humour in their comms. That's from the Happiness Report. So yeah, I think that's a trend that's coming through in Cannes this year, and is coming through in advertising. And I think as people realise that kind of the more fun you have and the braver you are, and the kind of the more playful you are as a brand, it actually has a demonstrable effect on how effective your advertising is.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's one of the areas that you might be able to achieve that infamous cut through that we've talked about on many an occasion. Like, it's making that stand out, isn't it? To go back to where we started, it's what's going to jump out in a sea where everything can feel quite samey. I think is one of the challenges. My family live overseas, and when they come to the UK, they'll often talk about how safe our advertising is. They'll be like, it's not very out there, it's not very daring. And I think, I'm not saying everybody should be out there and daring, it doesn't fit in with their sort of what they're trying to achieve as a brand, but I think there is definitely room for more creativity in the advertising that we're seeing and the advertising that we're consuming. So I guess, how will changes in consumer behaviour sort of influence creative strategy? Because, we talked about this in last month's sort of session where we talked about strategy and insight and it being very, focused on audience behaviours and changes, etc. And I think one of the things that keeps us coming back for more is that consumer behaviour is constantly changing and evolving. So how does sort of creative keep up with that?
I think one of the things that is going to have a huge impact across the industry is if you watch Netflix or Prime or Now or anything like that, you'll have, and we mentioned it already, you'll notice that all of a sudden you're watching ads again. Yeah. And we've gone from a world of streaming platforms not having any ads on them, kind of YouTube being skippable, VOD being skippable. You can fast forward the ads in programs you recorded, all that kind of stuff. At the moment, I think there is a lot of mediocre ads, and I mean, my wife Nicola does. I don't think she even sees adverts. I don't think they register with her, but they've been registering with her as we've been watching things like Netflix. Now she's going, wow, these ads are terrible. And I think people are just getting those ads back on TV. So I think there'll be a bit of a renaissance in a classic ad, a really good TV ad. But the factors that are different now are AdSmart exists, targeting exists. You can actually get on telly cheaper. Even YouTube is just an ever-changing beast, how we watch and consume TV-type content. And so it's just more accessible for people from a media spend point of view. It's more accessible. We talked about, you could literally make a TV ad on your iPhone now. So it's more accessible to people from the ad doesn't have to cost you £100,000 anymore. And the connected world around and beyond that means that as the core of a campaign is more accessible to people, kind of gives you more scope, more opportunity for that engagement that we were talking about before, and just being able to create something that feels bigger than the sum of all its parts. There's loads of studies where TV plus social media advertising plus radio advertising has a much bigger effect. And I think that more and more brands, more and more companies can use that to their advantage.
Yeah, and I think that leads on to sort of, how do we think about sort of multiple content formats across multiple channels, and how does, from that perspective, how do we utilise the different channels that are out there, the different formats that are out there to, as part of our creative strategies and making sure it aligns with audience and channel preferences, Paul? I think there's a big piece there.
Yeah. Right. So I think the point Andrew made there is that you can have a central creative idea, and often that can be expressed. It is quite amazing that it is often still expressed as a 30-second TV ad. 30 seconds, good amount of time. TV ad, well, it's a screen and it's moving, so we'll call it a TV ad. But you can bake a lot into that, because you can work out what your product service proposition is. You can work out how your brand lives and breathes through it. You've got your creative idea. You've kind of done your production bits. But I think then you've got to be really careful as you go into different platforms about how does that translate. So how does it go from landscape to portrait? How do you cope with the different edits? How do you cope with, TV and YouTube advertising is not the same as trying to stop someone's thumb from either swiping up or down. There's some really, really interesting stuff out there. We've been talking quite a bit about the work that Google just did with Kantar around their ABCD. We've talked about that in several videos, so I'm not going to go over all that again now. But a lot of it is about get your branding in early. Make sure that you're really retaining people's attention, making sure you're being very clear about what you want people to do as a result of seeing your ad. One of the biggest differences, although Andrew says we live in a connected world, your TV is connected, but people don't tend to click on their ads on TV. It may prompt them to go and search or something on their mobile phone. But so being very clear about the calls to action, and again, trying to be aware of the position of your ad in the funnel. That don't do a click here to buy if you're just still at the point of making people aware, or you're trying to build brand. So I think that's the first thing, is make sure that you're being platform appropriate and you're really thinking around that. Do make multiple formats. We're talking to clients about, you'll have quite a glossy TV ad, but maybe all your content on TikTok is going to be handheld, filmed on an iPhone, because it's platform appropriate. So it kind of means that you shouldn't worry about, I've got to remake this ad on all these different platforms. You think about what's going to work really well on each platform. And I think, just kind of go back to, Andrew's saying 70-30 media production. I mean, that's the creative's rule of thumb. Yeah. The media team's rule of thumb is 80-20. Yeah. And your CFO's rule of thumb was probably be 95-5. Yeah. But yeah, I think we've kind of covered it already. If you've got a great creative idea and you've thought about how it's going to proliferate, then or you should have thought at that stage, how are we going to do that with some budget constraints? But yeah, I think embrace as many content formats as you can if your audience is there and you've got a great idea that's going to work.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good place to sort of finish the main body of the webinar, in the sense that, or the masterclass, I think it is that balance, and it is about understanding the levers that you can pull, and therefore where you're best utilising that budget to drive that performance. I think ultimately, where we always finish these sessions is practical advice, so key takeaways. We normally ask people to do one or two sort of key things that we want people to be thinking about. So I guess I'll come to you first, Paul. What would your one bit of practical advice be in terms of the importance of creative in digital marketing?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be a bit contradictory. So embrace the proliferation of channels, make as many ads as you can. Use AI, talk to your colleagues in the media team about how that works and how you're going to learn what's really good. A/B test. Don't be scared to test and learn and fail, and be really broad and really prolific. But Andrew was telling me about a really good example of kind of doing the opposite. Do you want to talk about it, in fact? It's your little tale.
The Xbox Sega thing.
Yeah.
So Sega make Football Manager. You play Football Manager.
I don't play Football Manager, bizarrely, no, but I know what it is.
Xbox or FIFA? More a FIFA man.
Yeah, back in the day.
Xbox and Sega are advertising Football Manager. Came up with a campaign which they called the Everyday Tactician, and basically they invited gamers who were good at Football Manager to apply for a real life job as a football tactician at Bromley Football Club. Right. And the selected gamer led to the club's best ever season, while Xbox gamers increased by 190%. He won 2 Grand Prix in the direct lines and the entertainment lines for gaming, as well as a gold titanium line. This kind of idea that, and again, I'm going to contradict myself, classic TV ads are back, but an idea like that is something you go and do, and you make this thing, and then you tell everybody, you've made a story. You're creating your storytelling. You've created something to tell a story about. And in all of these different formats and different channels that you've got, you can tell that story in kind of different ways, either really in depth, and then you're back to Google's things about your ABCDs, where if you can weave your brand into the heart of that story, not in I'm stood in front of a blue screen with some pink noodles on it and our brand and font, but you actually make it part of the story, so they were using the thing that they're selling. Then that's magic as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and it's such a simple idea. I mean, the idea is it's essentially a job ad.
Yeah.
The rest of it writes itself, but once it works, and it took bravery. I don't know how much budget they put behind it. Probably quite a lot to tell people about it once they've done it, but
also delivered amazing results on the bottom line ultimately, and I think that's would be the key takeaway, in the sense that great ideas deliver great returns for clients.
And I think that's the big one from me, is just take it seriously, because that bit when you go in, what are we going to do? I can spend media, I can go on different channels, I can understand what my product proposition is and things, but how are we going to tell people about that thing? We have creative teams whose job it is to come up with those things, but this is the central bit for me of the whole of the clients marketing, the agency, everybody coming together to go, right, let's make something amazing, because unless it's interesting and amazing, we've wasted all the other bits because nobody's interested.
Yeah, and I think also in the example that you've given, it's something that is coming in increasingly in terms of, things like tone of voice, from a range of different channels or whatever medium you're putting out through, is that factor of authenticity. Because what I'd say is that feels, doesn't it, aligned to what the brand's trying to achieve in that example. Like, you've got a particular audience that are probably going to be quite interested in the result of an idea, and they're going to then follow that idea through. It feels right for that brand. And I think it's then about how do you tell that story authentically as well through, consistently over a period of time.
So it doesn't feel like advertising.
Yeah. It's a good point. So, nice place to finish. Thank you very much, Paul and Andrew. Much appreciated today. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. We'll be back next month with another Mediaworks Digital Masterclass, but thank you very much.